My video today is a fabulous little craft project to make a cover for a book. Now it can be any book, so a little sketchbook, it could be a notebook. So I have some suggestions here. There we go. Could be a little notebook, an exercise jotter, another sketchbook, a diary, or even your favourite sewing manual. So I think I am going to choose this one just for today. And this is a fantastic project to do with children as well. It's so easy for them. So bearing in mind this is the school holidays, just give them a pile of paper, some glue, and that'll keep them quiet for hours. So what you'll need, I have here, so as I said, some paper. So any old paper you have lying about the house, so old envelopes, brown wrapping paper. You can see there's more old envelopes, and the insides of these envelopes have some lovely patterns. And the whole project actually revolves around being able to find a variety of different patterns. So you can see the colour variations in these two. Some more brown envelopes, some music paper, some old book paper, dressmaking pattern paper. So I see, I do mean anything at all, and maps as well. All those old atlases, lovely decorative qualities here, even old magazines. So we'll also be needing some glue. So I have here a variety of different glues you can use. There's a spray-on ones. We have glue sticks. Love my giant glue stick. Or good old-fashioned PVA white glue. You believe you can get washable ones as well that come out of clothing. Probably that's a good idea, just in case. Then let me bring you a little bit closer. The studio's bathed in sunlight today, actually, it's beautiful. There we go. Lovely sunny day. Bit chilly, but very brightening. So also some acrylic paint. Now again, just cheap craft acrylic paint. These little bottles are really good, just from your local craft supplier. You could also use some embroidery floss. That's for later, I'll show you why. And some bit of ribbon. So I'm going to put those aside for the time being. And I'm going to show you how we're going to get started. First of all, you need to choose some paper to be your base. So I'm going to go with this brown paper. Choose something quite sturdy, especially if you're using the wet white glue, because that will make it a bit crinkled. But I wouldn't worry about wrinkles and crinkles, that just adds to the texture. So you just want to make sure that your paper is big enough to wrap right around the book when it's closed. So just take it right the way around. And you want to leave about, 4 centimetres extra to allow it to close. And a little more at the top and bottom. We can trim that off afterwards. We will trim it off to size. So that will be my base. Right, so we're going to work on the front. Maybe a good idea to have some plastic or newspaper to protect your surface. So I'm then going to just grab my papers, my decorative paper, and tear it up. Don't cut it, we want the raggedy edges. So let's see some of this. and you're going for contrasts in pattern and tone. So tone is the lightness or darkness. So let's see, this is quite dark in tone. So just tell yourself of some strips. Doesn't matter if they go squint. They don't have to be straight. In fact, it's probably nicer if they're not straight. Let's see, let's have some, what is it? I was looking for the music paper. And you could decide what pattern you want. So it may be a good idea to have your strips assembled in a pile on one side. Makes the gluing process faster. Let's see, what else do I have? Some more matte paper, I think. 2 pieces there. Even if you can find a map for the place you live, that might be quite nice. To have your hometown on the front of your book. I don't want too much white paper because of that. Okay, when you've got some strips assembled, you can start gluing down. So as I said, you could use spray glue. Try to do this in a well-ventilated area, so have the windows open. Keep it away from yourself, don't point it towards yourself or your clothes or your face or any pets. And you can just spray. I'm going to do a selection so you can see how to use various different glues. So, a little bit of spray mount. Other spray glues are available. Problem with using the spray glues is they go everywhere. So this is now all sticky. But I think I'm going to start with some of this in the top corner. And we're just going to place our papers on and cover our background paper. And don't worry about any overhanging bits at the moment. And some of this, so you can fill, don't like that white. Completely fill up any space that you have. I think I need a bigger variety of paper, so I'm going to grab my, oh, here we go. Here's a lovely pattern on this envelope. So it doesn't matter if your papers come off in little short strips or if you have long strips which cover the full width of your book cover. And I'm all sticky with spray glue. If you have any little uncovered patches, just pop some more on. Right, that's enough of the spray glue, I think. Yeah, I'm covered in spray glue. Do some with the glue stick. So here's a normal size glue stick. And I think it's probably easier just to cover the background first. Or certain discount bookstores, they have these giant sticks which are fabulous. Right, there we go. So cover your background with some glue. The sunshine is really giving me some filming problems today. It's creating very dark shadows. I hope you can see that. Right, so again, let's go for some more book paper, music paper. So we're just varying the different papers. It's actually adding visual texture. And let's see, where were my old books? Again, I don't want too much white, so. It's actually the reverse of the matte paper, but it has some interesting text on it too. So that. Some interesting markings. Sticking to everything, there's spray glue everywhere. Changed my mind, I do not recommend you use spray glue. It's extremely messy. Covered up a little bit of that. So. Don't worry if some of it overlaps. If it does, I'll just pop a bit of glue there. So I think the glue sticks are easy to use and they're not too messy because they don't get everywhere. I'm also going to do some of this white glue. So again, it's probably easier to pop a little on your background, and I like just an old store card or gift card. Makes a really good spreaders. So spread it out into a thin layer. And you need to work reasonably quickly. So again, I don't want straight edges. Taking that edge off. I'm just going to use that text on the back. There, and another piece of map here. A nice dark piece here. I think I'll use it that way. A little bit down. Again, it's overlapping a little bit, so I don't want too much of an overlap. There, I've not got any overlap. So I'm going to fill that in. Let's see. Such fun doing this. You can just forget about. In fact, you can even switch your brain off, give it a rest. Got some different colours of paper here. Let's see these magazines, what have I got here? I don't like anything which is too identifiable. So, not something that you want to be tempted to sit and read. I've got my glue starting to dry. Spread it a bit. So even turning upside down makes it a little bit less easy to read. My fingers are still sticky with the spray glue. Personally, I love these little diagrams you get on dressmaking patterns. So I'm going to pop that there, give that pride of place right in the middle. That's going to be right in the front of my cover. Perhaps the centre of the back. It's not quite big enough. There we go. What I'm doing here is just going back and sticking down all the overlapped bits which don't yet have any glue. The card's really good for smoothing things down. But don't worry if you have any edges that are sticking up, it all adds texture. And they're all going to be stitched down anyway later. So, final little bit. I love the music paper, let's have some more of that. Big piece right up at the end. Something for here. And something else for the final bit. I've actually got some old ledger paper as well. Let's have a little bit of that. If you've got any handwriting, So old letters and bills, even unpaid ones, best thing to do with them. They're very pretty when you start getting all that red writing on them. There we go. So just revisit if there's any gaps. I think that's pretty much filled. Of course, if your background paper was a bit flimsy, you may actually want to put 2 layers down. So we've got some unglued bits here. I'm just going to go back. A couple of little bits of brown showing through. So let me see. So I want the whole thing to be quite strong. So the more layers you add, if you wanted to go back and add some more layers on the top. I've got some little gaps along the bottom, but I'm not going to worry too much because I'll be trimming along the bottom anyway. Here's a big piece that's not stuck down. Right, once it's all stuck down, I'm going to go over it with a layer of my white glue. Now, PVA and similar are actually acrylic based, which is basically a plastic. So they're actually quite strong and they will give the whole piece strength. So I'm covering it over with a layer of this white glue. And that will seal everything and give the whole thing a bit of strength. So just a thin layer, and again, the plastic card is a really excellent tool for spreading glue. Right, so I'm going to set this aside in the sunshine to dry. If I get a bit impatient, I will take a hairdryer over it as well to speed it up a bit. Then I think because my backing paper wasn't particularly sturdy, I'm actually going to either glue another layer on the back or at least go over it with white glue. But I'll see what it's like once it's dried. Now I'm going to wash my hands. So here's my piece all dried. It actually wasn't particularly sturdy in the end, so I put another layer of brown paper on the back. But as I say, we're going to be stitching it anyway, so. Right, it's all nice and dry. It's nice and thick. So what we're going to do now is we're going to paint it. So you can paint it in any colour you like, or several colours. See this one here, I've used my favourite green and blue colours, and I've not put too much paint on because I've allowed the patterns in the background to show through. So the thing about acrylic, you can use it neat practically, and it will be quite opaque, and that means it will cover up more of the pattern. Or you could dilute it and it is almost like a watercolour wash, so it allows any pattern or visual texture on the back to come through. So before I do that, here's a couple of other examples. It's like Blue Peter now, isn't it? Here's what I've done earlier. Again, more greens and blues. This one's all greens. The papers here are all higgledy-piggledy. Purple and pink, pink and blue and purple. So you can see the general sort of idea. So let me see. I think I'm going to go with my favourite teal colour and some pink, some stronger pink. Yeah, I've got this sort of paint with glitter through it, so let's go with those. I may add a little bit of dark blue. So I've got either a paint palette for mixing my paint colours, or you could just use an old plastic tray. I think this is a food tray to give it a good wash in soapy water. I've got some water and a couple of paintbrushes. So let me go with I think I'll start with the pink. I'm just going to pop it straight on. You can mix it into your palette first if you want. I've got quite a lot of water on my brush, so you can see the background designs coming through. So I'm just doing it in blotches. I'm not really wanting to cover the whole thing in one colour. I want it to be done in separate patches. See, a tiny little amount of paint goes a long way. There we go. Right, now a bit blue. This is lagoon, sort of teal blue. I'm just going to throw it around. I'm not even going to wash my brush, because where the colours blend, I'm getting other colours, getting a lovely purple there. If there's any little bits of the background pattern you don't like so much, put a thicker layer of paint on. I don't like that writing there, so put a bit of a thick paint on it. Glamour Dust in Aqua. Oops. This one's may need shaking. This one's actually quite thin in consistency. There's not an awful lot of colour to that one. I think this may be something I want to use over the top of this one. Yeah, I don't like that at all. A little bit of this darker blue. Again, I'm using water to blend. Some darker blue over this side. We're not looking for a great work of art here, we're just having some fun. Just making something out of junk which would otherwise go in the bin. There we go. I don't want hard lines, again, a bit more water. And to add a bit more texture where the paint's puddling, I'm just going to do some take it off with a scrap piece of paper. And it actually creates some very nice texture. Look at all that lovely printy texture it's creating there. And I've also got some lovely collage paper for my next project. So again, I'm going to set that aside to dry, or otherwise blast it with the hairdryer. While my book cover is drying, it's almost dry now, just a little bit tacky in some areas, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with this ribbon. So if you want to make a tie to wrap your book up to keep it closed, you can either use embroidery floss, and I'll show you how to make these stitched ties later once I get the machine out. But you can use a bit of ribbon or cotton tape. But this is only cream, so what I'm going to do is get some colour on that too. So just a little bit of my paint. And make sure it's quite dilute, so lots of water. Again, the acrylic paint will make it go very stiff and hard if you put too much. So just a little bit of paint with lots of water. And try to with a bit of pink. You could even do this with just a strip of fabric. Just doesn't matter if there's any little bits unpainted, but there we go, I've got most of it. Alright, doesn't it look lovely? So again, I'm going to set that aside to dry. And by the time we've done our stitching, that should be dry. Once the book cover has dried, and I used that time to clear away all the paint and wash up, so I'm going to now stitch it. So you can choose just to use straight stitches. Well, not particularly straight, but this is kind of landscapey, isn't it? So you could do something like this if you wanted to. Or if you have some decorative stitches on your machine, you could choose to use them here. And see how many stitches you can fit into one little project like this. But if you only have a basic machine that does zigzag, that's absolutely fine as well. Zigzag can look really decorative. You can choose to make it wider, narrower, longer or shorter. So you'll be amazed at the variety of effects you can achieve with just a simple zigzag stitch. So I've chosen a few colours of thread to match my paints. They don't need to match exactly, but I think this is generally the same sort of palette, although I do really love that lemon as well. So I may throw in a little bit of that for a contrast. And I probably won't use all these colours. But again, I think selecting even that pink and purple, the purple is adding real depth. It's adding a deep contrast which isn't actually in the paint. I think the lemon's lovely, the jade green, pale blue. So I'll see how I get on. Depends how often I can be bothered changing my colour, I suppose. So I'm just going to be using one colour in the bobbin throughout because you won't be seeing that coming through it anyway. And if it does, your machine's set wrong. So I think I'm going to start with, let's see, let's start with the purple. So I'm going to thread up and be back to you in a minute. I've got my lovely little Alpha Practic 9 machine here. It's got a great selection of stitches. It may be a good idea for you to have a piece of scrap fabric beside you to test out your stitches before you go and stitch them out on the paper. Because paper, of course, will mark with holes, and if you don't like the stitching, you want to take it out, you're left with the holes to deal with. So now I'm all threaded up. I've tested some of the stitches I want to use, so I just need to stitch. Now you can roughly follow the edges of the paper if you can still see them, but if they're all pretty well stuck down, it doesn't matter. You can go any way you like. You can go up and down straight lines, you can go across the way, that way, you can go at diagonals, you can do snakes, anything you like. It's just all about having fun. So I'm going to start, I think, here. I've chosen a nice stitch to start with, so off I go. So I was roughly following some of the contours of the paper. It doesn't actually look like it's that snaky, although I did want it to. So I know now I need to vary the direction a bit more. So I'm going to choose another stitch, I think. Let's go for, let me see, right, some lovely little herringbone type feather stitch, and let me give that one a try. It's like a lovely feather stitch. It's actually very refreshing to force myself not to sew in a straight line. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So I'm going to leave you now to carry on with that, and I'll be back when I've finished stitching. Okay, so I've finished my stitching. Done quite a lot, you can see on the back. I've just varied the stitches I've used, I've varied the colours. I think that's looking lovely. So now I'm going to cut my book cover to size. So actually it goes so well on that cover. I could just get a little piece, pop it, stick it on the front. The other thing you could do with this is cut it into strips and use it as bookmarks, or use a little piece as a card. But yes, we've made it for a book cover, so again, I'm going to wrap it around the book. And fold it over. Pull it quite tight. Then in the back, again, fold and crease. Fold and crease it. Then I want to trim it, so if you can see the book in there, you can either trim right along the cover, just leaving it slightly bigger, or if you prefer, you can take a pen or pencil and actually mark it on. So I think that's what I'm going to do to show you how to do that. So let me grab a pen or a pencil and possibly some clips too. Right, so I've got some of my little dressmaking clips which is holding the cover tight. And I can just draw along the line of the cover. And at the top, I can just trim this to size. There. So I'm going to take the clips off. I can see where my cover is, so I'm going to trim this just slightly bigger because I need to allow space for stitching. So I want to cut it off a little bit bigger than that. About that much, I think. 3 or 4 millimeters bigger. Of course, I could go and find myself a ruler. I've got my creases, so I can fold that in and fold that in. Again, I can trim that edge up a little there. Right, so now what I'm going to do is work my way around. That is a bit wonky there. So I'm going to stitch down this edge, both these edges in fact, to neaten them up, although they're fine as they are. And I'm going to stitch along, right along this top edge, stitching this over and this over to make my little closures for the book cover. So I'm going to use a close zigzag stitch. So I've done a test and I'm looking for something a bit like that. So this is 5 millimeters wide zigzag and it's quite close. This is about 0.5 millimeter length. The stitch length here is about 1 millimeter, so they're slightly more open. I don't want to stitch it too densely because this is just paper, remember. And if you perforate the paper too much, the edge will just tear off. So I think something like this will be better. So I've got my machine set up. I've got my jade green in the top. I've actually got a light blue bobbin. So that will give me a slight colour mix as I go, which would be quite nice. I'm going to start with these short edges. There we go, it just gives it a bit more of a finished edge. And the other short edge. to fold over and right along the long edge. We start a little bit in from the edge here and reverse back for this edge. Now I'm actually letting the needle go off the edge of my paper, so it's completely wrapping the edge in thread. Just tuck my folded edge in at the bottom. Reversing back a bit just to finish off my stitching. So there is one side of my book cover done. Just to finish off a stitching along the other edge. Again, reversing a little bit. So push it forward. So trimming off my thread ends, and that's my book cover. So let's slip it on. So we'll just put one cover in that side and one cover in that side. Right, there we go. So now I'm going to show you how to make the machine wrapped cords if you wanted to close it off. To determine the length of cord that you need, so I've wrapped it around my book and left myself plenty to tie, and I think I'm going to use 2 blue. So I'm going to double that length. So I'm going to cut myself 2 blue, 2 lengths of the blue, and let's go for one of the pink. I'm just going to sort of roughly twist those together. But let's go for 2 of the pink as well. So I've got quite a nice thick cord there. Right, so as I said, I've got my machine set up with a zigzag stitch already. So I'm going to take my cord and just twist it, pop it under the foot and just zigzag around the edge of my cord. So you'll have to leave a little tail at the back to hold, and as you feed it under, just twist it round with your fingers. You may have to pull it through if the feed dogs are not actually able to grip your cord. I'm having to pull it through slowly and evenly, don't jerk it. So the slower you let it pass through, the more thread you'll get wrapped around it. If you pull it through quite quickly, you'll get a lot less thread. So the stitching is holding all the cords together. If you want it to have more thread wrapped around it, you can pass it through again. You can also vary the colours that you're using to wrap your threads. I'm going to tie a knot in the end just to make sure it doesn't unravel. You could add beads at the end as well if you want to. So the starter end always has a little bit of a loose section. Just tie that and just trim those off. So you can choose to leave this loose, or you can stitch it on, maybe stitch it onto the spine with a few zigzag stitches, and then you can wrap it around and tie it, or if you want you can put a little button. So what I've done in this one is I've actually made a paper bead, so rolled up paper over a cocktail stick, glued it all, left it to dry, and wrapped my cord around that to make a button. But you could just use either a bead or a little coloured button if you have one. And that's my book cover. If you don't want to make the stitched card, then remember the ribbon that we painted, so isn't that beautiful? You could do the same with the ribbon. You can either leave it loose or you could stitch it into the spine. And that, I think, is just beautiful.